So when I played Sonic Mania for the first time, I didn't really enjoy myself. I didn't really like the game that much. I loved it at some point, especially around the beginning, but then I started dying a lot and getting a ton of game overs, and in Sonic Mania in particular, when you get game overs, you have to restart all the way to Act 1, and there's a boss with each act, so if you were to die on the boss of Act 2, you'd have to redo a level, redo a boss, and then redo another level just to get back to where you were. And even then you have 3 lives. You could lose those 2 lives along the way of doing Act 1, the first boss in Act 2. And then if you die with that last life on the final boss of the zone, you'll have to go all the way back, and that can be extremely aggravating. But this was also the case in the classic Sonic games, and I never really had much of a problem with it. Yes, it was kind of annoying, but I always felt like I got enough lives. I didn't die too often in the classic Sonic games, and something vital that's in the classic Sonic games and not in Sonic Mania, as far as I know, is that there were continues. In the first 3 Sonic games, there were continues from getting a bunch of points in special stages or regular stages, so that when you die, you can continue, and all you have to do is redo the last act. Unlike in Sonic Mania, where every time you get a game over, you're forced to redo the entire zone, even if you die on Act 2 of it. Because of this, I had to frequently replay zones in Sonic Mania, and it really bogged down my enjoyment of the game and experience with it overall. A lot of you may be asking, well, maybe it's just because you suck huge dick at the game. I had no problem. I didn't get any game overs. Sonic Mania was relatively easy for me. I had a lot of fun. I had no problems with it, and that's good for you. But I feel like I'm pretty good at classic Sonic games. I can play through all of Sonic 1 and all of Sonic 2 with pretty much no problem. Sonic 3 and Knuckles is a bit harder and longer, so I can't say that I can get through that game completely without getting a couple game overs. But in general, I'm pretty good at 2D platformers. I'm pretty good at classic Sonic. Not the best, but I'd say I'm about average. So if I'm having these problems and it's bogging down the experience so much for me, I'm getting so mad off this, in this game, but not in the classic Sonic games, there must be something that makes this game harder, and I couldn't really pinpoint it until I played as Tails. Now, Tails is a lot easier than Sonic and Knuckles because he can fly over things, and he can generally be a lot more safe, so I could rack up a good amount of lives. I had about 15 when I got to Oil Ocean, opposed to the 3 that I had when I got to Oil Ocean on my first playthrough. The game was a lot more fun, and it wasn't just because Tails was easier as a character, it was just because I had a lot more lives, I had a lot more tries. I still fucked up a lot on the Oil Ocean Zone boss, but everything was just so much more fun. I could focus on the fun parts of the game, because with this live system, you have to change your whole mentality while playing the game, and you have to be very mindful of your lives. Every time I was jumping over a platform, jumping over an obstacle, on my first playthrough, I was like, holy shit, I better not lose a life. I really need to not get hit, because if I lose a life, I have less lives to try and figure out how to beat the boss. And this comes to my major point of the video, where these bosses in Sonic Mania are very, very unique. They're unique in a way that you'd only really see in fan games. With the boss fights, I feel like they try to focus on being more unique than focus on being easy to understand on the first try. And I feel like that's fine in general, but with this live system, a lot of the Act 2 bosses, not all of them, but a good chunk of them, have a bunch of trial and error, in my opinion. A lot more trial and error than they did in the classic Sonic games. I felt like most of the boss fights in the classic Sonic games were straightforward, but in Mania, there's some unique ways I have to think about killing them. Like, for example, in the Act 2 boss for Stardust Speedway, my first playthrough, I didn't know that I had to spin dash into the Silver Sonics. I just tried to jump them into Metal Sonic when they jumped into a ball, and it worked, not as well, but it still worked. I didn't know that you could spin dash into them while they were spin dashing, because it wasn't super clear to me, and I had to take a long time to figure out how to beat that boss. Another one that I actually didn't find out how to beat properly until another playthrough, because I just abused invincibility frames with it, was the Press Garden Zone boss where he has the little saw, and you have to make his saw go into a crate so it breaks, and then you can attack him. I didn't really get that, so I had to kind of force my way through that boss fight. And it wasn't really a problem at that point because I had a lot of lives and the boss fight was pretty easy to abuse through other means, and you didn't really get punished for getting hurt that much. But on the later bosses, specifically Hydro City Zone and Oil Ocean Zone especially, like, the boss fights had the same trial and error aspect, but were a lot harder, and you'd actually get more punished for getting hit and got comboed. So it really, I had to keep redoing the zones. I got more and more aggravated over time. My enjoyment of the game greatly diminished because of that. And then also, you'd think, like, the levels are really fun to play through. So you'd think, like, well, you're replaying the zones, it kind of sucks, but at least they're fun to play through. Well, not for me, because I got a game over, I kept getting a game over, I had 3 lives, that's only 3 attempts to do the boss. You could lose those lives in Act 1, the Act 1 boss, or Act 2, so I had to play very, very, very carefully to make sure and make a point to not lose lives. And that made the gameplay of doing Act 1, the Act 1 boss, and then Act 2 all the way up to the boss normally should be fun on surface level, but because of having to try and consciously preserve lives and be very careful, it really slowed down the experience. It really ruined the experience for me in a lot of ways, because what I love about Classic Sonic is being reckless, going fast, and even if I get punished, hopefully I can recover and, you know, play through the game. And obviously I don't, like, run into pits all the time, but sometimes I like to be very reckless, maybe die because of it in a certain area, and then when I go back to that area later, I'll know what's there, not be reckless, then after I finish that point, I'll just be reckless again. So it's kind of like a trial and error. Can I be reckless here? What can I get away with? How fast can I go through the level? But doing that, obviously, costs a lot of lives. So even though I spent about 2 hours of my original playthrough redoing old stages and being mad that I kept dying, I decided to do Tails and Knuckles run because I really wanted to like Sonic Mania and I wanted it to be redeemed. And in a lot of ways, playing through the game as Tails, it really got redeemed. So, like, before I hated Oil Ocean with a burning passion. I wasn't a huge fan of Hydro City, but I didn't hate it as much as Oil Ocean. Don't get me wrong, Oil Ocean is still my least favorite zone, but I still had a decent amount of fun playing through it as Tails, and I had a lot more fun than I did the first time with a lot of the later zones as Tails, because I could be safer in the early levels and grind up 15 lives opposed to barely getting through the zones without a game over and starting with the default 3 lives you have every time you get a game over. And with the lack of continues, just, oh boy, Sonic Mania honestly could be the best Sonic game in my opinion, the best. Because in my opinion, the zones and the levels and the level design is a lot more fun than the classic Sonic games. I still love the classic Sonic games, but I think Mania improved on them a lot, and I love Sonic Mania, and it could be my favorite Sonic game of all time. But this live system, and the lack of continues, and it just really, really bogs down the experience, and lowers it down like a couple games from my top 5 favorite Sonic games. And I feel bad because it's such a minuscule thing, in my opinion, to the developers. Like, the developers probably just put in the live system just like in the classic games, and they were like, okay, here's the live system, let's develop the game, let's make these levels fun, let's make these mechanics fun. And they succeeded at that, but this one thing that they had in the game just bogs down everything. It isn't like a certain level or a certain enemy or a certain time in the game. It's persistent throughout the entire experience as a fundamental mechanic, and I honestly just wish that they would put in an infinite lives option. Like, when I was having this trouble, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna look up how to get infinite lives, and there was a little exploit to do in Press Garden Zone, which took a really long time, so I didn't bother doing it, but there wasn't like any cheat code or menu option to have infinite lives. I really think this game would benefit from having an infinite lives option, so that people who enjoy more of a challenge or like the nostalgia for whatever reason of having a live system can have it, and then the people like me who just want to play through the game and get punished to a much lesser extent when we die. Just going back to a checkpoint, or even fixing the live system to where it exists, but it only puts you back to the beginning of a boss fight or the beginning of an act instead of the whole zone. Sonic Mania would have been, and still can be, the perfect Sonic game. The perfect and best 2D Sonic game. The only thing holding it back is the live system. And it may be a minor thing to some of you guys, especially you skilled classic Sonic players. But for someone like me, who likes to play his games pretty recklessly, and likes Sonic because I can go fast and be retarded and have a shit ton of fun, the live system just really, it basically turns the game from a 10 out of 10 in my opinion to like a 7 out of 10 or a 6 out of 10. It makes me, it bothered me that much. It bothered me that much. There's only been a couple other Sonic games that have bothered me that much to that extent, which has been Sonic and the Black Knight and Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric. It's sad that I've had an experience with Sonic Mania that gave me just as much aggravation as those poorly designed, in my opinion, games. Do you guys have this experience? Can you guys relate? Talk about it in the comments. I'd love to discuss it with you. If you disagree, also say in the comments. I'd love to have a more in-depth discussion about this topic. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in another video. Bye.